Okay, so this is one of the projects that I'll be using the template on. It's a small shelter. You can see by the scale of the woman in there that it's about 7 feet across, about 7 or 8 feet high. It has a little bit of a roof on it. It has 4 posts, one on each corner, right? It has a couple of what I call jambs, because there's a door that can actually be fit into here, or a retractable screen door. In the back, there's a couple of opportunities to basically for support and to put some smaller screens or windows or whatever in there, and then some wainscoting down here. There'll be some seating, etc., etc. There's a roof on it, and so on. Okay, so each of these, everything in there is a component, or it's basically going to be like these are called rails, these are called jambs, these are called posts. Now this same particular framing, for the most part, is going to also be usable to make some other stuff like adult bunk beds or dorm room lofts. This is just an initial layout, and then I've got a firewood shelter that's kind of underway. It's still needs some design work on that, but basically if we go back to this cave, or whatever we want to call it, this shelter, what I want to do is I need to figure out where each and every one of these boards are going to attach to each other. So it's all a mortise and tenon type of structure, and I'll explain my mortises and tenons versus conventional mortise or traditional mortise and tenons in how. But so right here we have, for instance, I'll just look on the inside. So there's going to be a mortise that's going to go from this board is going to have a tenon on it, and then there's going to be a mortise inside that other board. Let me look at this. There's a mortise that's going to end up going right here. And I designate the mortise, or I show the mortises as this yellowish with the red in the middle. I'll explain that later. But each of those has a precise location. And so when I'm doing the layout, eventually after I've got everything kind of laid out where those boards are going to go, then what I'll do is I'll create like a pencil mark right here, a digital pencil mark, which is at the center line. That allows me to then help with dimensioning later on. I'll show you that in a minute. So then I go up to the next one, and we'll look at what we've got. So I show a mortise here, but this one's actually not going to be used on this structure. But I want to do the layout so that everything is all set to go. Now we do have another mortise here, but then you can see there's a mortise in there. So again, I'm not using the one down here on this project, but I am using the one here. But if we go over to the loft bed, it's just the opposite. So what we end up is we have a mortise down here that we're going to use for the rail on a bed, because that's more matching up with the mattress height, correct? What I'm going to end up doing is taking each and every one of these boards, and if there's 4 of those, like the posts, then I'm going to pull one out, and I'm going to take it over, and I'm going to set it on a separate place on the screen. I think this is pretty common with any 3D design software. You can do that type of stuff with it. But I have 4 of those. I have one here, one back there, and one back there. But I only need one on the cut list to show me what I need to do to that board. Then I'm going to take another one like this one here, and I'm going to grab that guy, and I'm going to take that over, and then I'm going to grab a couple of these shorter guys, etc., etc. So they end up going over into a configuration that looks like this. So I have that longest post on the top, that's the post, and it tells me here I need 4 of those. So this is starting to become my cut list. Now in my cut list I'll also have some other dimensions, which would be the length of each of those boards and so on, but I don't want to clutter the drawing with that right now. So, but you can see what I've got is not only the post that's not being used on the cave, and then there's one that's not being used here on the cave, but it is being used right here, and it is being used right down there. So when I go back to the cut list, I show all of those. Mortise here, 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 and here. And then if we look at it from the 2-inch side of that board, you can see the same mortises are located there. And then when we get down to the rail, there's going to be a similar situation. There's one here, and there's one here. And if we look at how those are used on the actual cave, they are going to be used for a door jamb that's going to be placed right down here. And so we've got a mortise and a tenon going on there. That same one is going to end up being used up here, And this is the same rail. So if we look inside there, we have a mortise and a tenon going on in there. And in those rafters, what we've got is they also are going to have tenons on the ends, and then the rafter ends, or sometimes called a subfascia or whatever you want to call it, these guys here, those will have mortises on them. So you can see a mortise there and a mortise there. Now where that translates is back here. I'm calling this fascia, by the way, and again, in technical terms it might be considered a subfascia or whatever, but just for simplicity, there's, you can see the mortises that have to go into there. Okay, so to do this layout, I'm going to go to this board, which is one of the posts, right? And I'm going to start from the left, which is the same way that I would lay out a board using a ruler. I would place my clip on the left end, and you can see that I placed my digital pencil mark here, and when I go out into the shop, it's going to be a real live pencil mark. So I'm going to measure from that corner to there. That's the same way that I'm dimensioning, is the same way that I'm going to measure later. The next one, I go from the same corner with the ruler set in the same spot, go over to that mark and up. Going over to the next one as soon as I can see it. Going over to the left corner, going up, and then again over to that mark. Again, this is the same way that I'd be doing it on a board. In fact, I'll go out into the shop after this and do the exact same thing, but on a real board once I have these dimensions. And then this one happens to be 92 inches. Okay, so I have that entire board dimensioned, and so what I've got is 2 inch, 24, 56, 68, 86, and 92, and again that's to the center line of each of those mortises. So this is different than what a carpenter would do on the house. They're going to lay out a bottom plate and a top plate. They're probably going to put them together and then mark to the left edge or the right edge, depending on whether, probably depending on whether they're right-handed or left-handed, but they're actually going to mark from here to like here-ish, or wherever that board is going to come. They're going to do that with each one of those. Instead, we're marking to the center of each one. I do have a 4-inch board. We know that already. We have a 2-inch board. So that's the dimensions for there. Now with the next board, this is, again, I'm just going down in lengthwise. So I have a rail, which is going to be the piece that is, there's one up here, one up here, one here, one over here, and then there's a one in the back right in there. There's 5 of those altogether. So if we go to those and I dimension those, now they do not get a mortise in the front at all. They only get the mortise along the 2-inch side, so you can't see any mortises right there. But I did leave the same digital pencil mark, and so from there we can just kind of get a little better angle on it, and then I'm going to do the same thing, dimensioning from there to there, which is 20 inches. And again, I'm going to go over the same, starting from the left where I'm going to put my ruler, and then I'm going to measure from there to there at 60 inches. And those, by the way, are, I think 80. Yep, those are 80, and again they're also 4 inches going across that way, and they're all 2-inch material. So now I have my layout for the rail. The jamb door is a little different. That is, let's just go take a look at that. Okay, so that's only on the front right here. It's that vertical piece, and I think it's 80 inches long, and I designed that so that it would fit a standard door opening framing for any kind of door. This is the standard opening, rough opening for a walk door, like a storm door, like a Larson storm door, or there's also some really cool retractable screens, and they're designed for an 80-inch opening, and then the opening in between can be like a variation anywhere from, I think, around 30 inches on up to 36 or 40 wide. So I set it up so that I think they're spaced at 36 inches wide, and so a retractable screen will fit right into this opening. So But the only place that this has any mortises is right here. There's just the one mortise, and there's again this, it's repeating itself over here, and then we'll get into this in a little bit, but that's the tenons are going to be mounted on the end. So now if we go back to those cuts in the cut list and we look at that, again, this is the jamb. Now I'm going to go up to there, and the only one that I have is right here. So it's just that one right there. So to dimension that, I'm going to go to here, to the, again, left edge, come up, and I've got a 16-inch dimension to the center of that. And then the rafters, I don't have any on at all, but we get into the fascia or the subfascia, depends on your terminology. And again, you can see I have 4 mortises on that. We'll just go over to that, just to kind of take a look at that. Here's your roof, and if I go up and just kind of take a look at where those all come into play, and it's symmetrical, so the other side's exactly the same. But again, if I remove or hide that one, that one, that one, and that one, then what we show is where the rafters are going to come in. And then you can see the design, how this is part of the reason for the space up here, is that then you can get at those. There's a bolt that has to go through there, and I'll just see if I can try to catch that. I can. Okay, so if we look at transparently, you can see that there's a bolt that needs to go from this side of the surface through and into the tenon that's mounted on the end of that. And by doing it with this space in here, that space allows the space for a wrench to get in there to tighten that up, but it also then becomes the space that is used for ventilation. That's a huge item on any kind of structure like this, that you want to get that airflow going through there, whether it be for human beings or for firewood or whatever. So now if we go back to the cut list, take a look at that exact same piece, and we've got that one right here. And I'm going to again start on the left side, and I'm going to dimension from the end to the first one, again from the end to the second one. Stick with conventional wisdom and go from here to here, and then from here to here, because the other advantage to that is that then you can also finish your dimensions, which go from here to the very end that board. So I have my mortise center line at 1 inch, I have a center line at 9, a center line at 39, a center line at 47, and then the board itself is 8 feet long, or excuse me, 48 inches long. And then if you want to backtrack, then you could also go like this, and that's not a bad way to do it, and that way you can kind of double check on stuff.